Have you thought about your muscles this morning? Oh, yes. All right. Well, let's learn then about the femoral triangle. Have you ever heard of your femoral triangle? Can you guess where it is? Good guess. All right. Femoral triangle. So landmark number 1 will be the inguinal ligament. So let's put that in. Here's our inguinal ligament. And that came from the anterior iliac spine. Put your hand on your anterior iliac spine. Get to know it. Right there. Feel it? Come around your ilium and come before it dips in. That's the anterior iliac spine. So that's what this point is. This point will be your pubic tubercle. And since we know this is at the superior aspect of the muscles of the anterior thigh, we can put a line here and a line here, and this will be lateral, and this will be medial. And who's going to tell me what muscle is crossing from the anterior iliac spine to go down to the medial aspect? What is it? Sartorius, sure. So we're going to put in the sartorius. And now we've made a triangle. What's important about that triangle? Quite a bit. What are the contents of the triangle? One, we'll have the femoral nerve. The femoral nerve. We'll have the femoral artery. The femoral vein. And now to make the word we want to make, we have to stretch a little bit, so we say we have an empty space. There are no empty spaces in your body, but we need an E here, so we'll do that. And then we need an L, and our L will be for lymphatics. And lymph nodes. So, if we take our letters and put them in position, we'll have the nerve, then the artery, then the vein, then the empty space, and then the nodes and lymphatics here. So this will be our N. This will be our A, this will be our V, our E, and our L. So what does it spell? Navel. That doesn't help you very much, but it lets you know what major structures are right here at the superior aspect of the groin. So if you have to go in for the femoral artery for a pressure point, somebody's bleeding significantly in the leg, you can pick it up right here. Did you know that was at the surface? Did you? No? Are you listening? Okay. I get no response. So now then, let's look at the posterior thigh muscles. continue with our muscles. Take the hamstrings. And the muscles that constitute the hamstrings on the posterior thigh will be what? The rectus femoris, the semimembranosus, semimembranosus, and the semitendinosus, I think I put an extra U in this one that doesn't belong. Let me take it out. So these will form, yes?
Is it the biceps femoris in the hamstring or the rectus femoris with the quadriceps?
This is the biceps. Thank you. I'm having too much fun with you that I didn't get a clean synapse there. I apologize. It's the, thank you, always correct. If I can correct you, you can correct me, right? So this should be biceps femoris. I apologize. We know it has two heads. So these give then the shape to the posterior thigh. And we're going to have two heads for our biceps femoris. One will be on the ischium, and the other will be on the distal femur. So we want number one here, origin, the ischium, and distal femur. And for 2, we'll just have the origin as the ischium. And 3, the ischium. And they will all insert on the proximal medial tibia. And what is their action going to be? They're crossing one joint here. What are they going to do? They're back here. When they contract, what are they doing? No, that's not flexing. They're back here. Here's your ischium, and you're coming here. They're going to contract. What is this? Extending. Extending. Extending hip. But then they're coming on down to proximal tibia. So when they, what are they doing here? This, what's that? At the knee. That's flexing. That's flexing the knee. All right, that gives us our posterior thigh muscles. And then let's go to the, do we want to do anterior thigh next? Let's see what we want to do. Posterior thigh, fine. Let's do medial thigh. Medial thigh. So medial thigh will be coming from the pubic bone, medial thigh, coming down to the medial proximal tibia. We're origin at the pubic bone. And we'll insert down on medial proximal tibia. And what will it do when it contracts? It will adduct the thigh. It's an adductor. And it can flex the knee because it's going to the tibia, it's crossing that joint. Let's go to the anterior leg. I just picked easy ones for you so you get some muscles at each level. This one will be the tibialis anterior. So you can guess where it's going to be going. It will be coming from the lateral head of the tibia and the shaft, and it's going to go down to the first metatarsal and first tarsal bone. So for the tibialis anterior, it's going to originate from the lateral tibia in the proximal position, and it's going to cross anterior tibial coming across the tibia to insert in the first metatarsal and the first tarsal bone. So now who's going to tell me what the function's going to be as we go from lateral here, cross over, come around to our instep. When that contracts, what's it going to do to the foot? It's going to invert it to do that. That's inverting. But it's also going to dorsiflex. This is the dorsum of the foot, and if I'm going to flex it, that's dorsiflex. So invert and dorsiflex for action here. So this brings us then to posterior leg muscles. Yes? On the medial thigh? Didn't I give you the name? That's the gracilis. The gracilis equals the gracilis. What does gracile mean? She's a gracile young lady. Slender. Slender. So this is a thin, slender muscle. All right, then we want posterior leg. Everybody knows the posterior leg, right? What's it called? You have two muscles on the posterior leg. The superficial one is the gastrocnemius, and the deep one is the soleus. So superficial equals gastrocnemius, and the deep is the soleus. So what do we know about the gastroc? It gives the shape to the posterior leg. And it's very large. And having a large gastrocnemius is part of the human condition. Do you know any other animal that has a large gastrocnemius? It's a human characteristic. I used to say that the difference between Cal girls and Stanford girls, we have all these hills to climb, and they were walking on the flat, so we all had bigger calves than they did. But now with all your treadmills and everything, it sort of is reducing that, so can't use that anymore. But the gastrocnemius now is going to originate where? Does anybody know? It's going to originate at the medial and lateral epicondyles of the femur. Medial and lateral epicondyles of femur. Now everybody knows where it's going to insert. Where? What's the name of the bone? Come on. I'll wait. Calcaneus, sure. What's the common name? Heel bone, right. So it's going to insert on the calcaneus via the Achilles tendon. It inserts on calcaneus via the Achilles tendon. If you want to incapacitate somebody, you cut that tendon, right? You don't go very far with that. So the action here, if it's coming to my heel and it's contracting, what's it doing to my foot? It's called plantar flex. Plantar flex. So we had dorsiflex coming this way, plantar flex. I always think you're planting your foot on the ground. It's going that way. To do that, my gastroc is contracting. So now the soleus is deep to the gastroc, so it's originating. Well, let's put in action here, plantar flex. We got that. That's its main function. And the soleus, it will originate from the proximal fibula and femur, so it's not crossing the joint. This will be proximal tibia and fibula, and we'll be inserting in the Achilles tendon too. When you study muscle physiology, you'll get the difference between these in their capacity to function. They do differ. Then the action would be again the same, plantar flex. So that gives you some of the basic muscles of your lower extremity. So with that introduction to our muscles, let's now look at the histology of muscles. How are muscles built? We have 3 different kinds of muscles. Probably something you got in your basic courses. 3 kinds. This is histology, which, as we said, is the science of tissues. And we have 3 kinds of muscles. Muscle tissue. We have smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. These all differ in structure, in function, and location. So we'll take each one and see how it's built and where we find them and why we need different kinds of muscle. So we're taking smooth. What's another name for smooth? Pardon? Visceral. Why can it be called visceral? Because it's found surrounding viscera. What are viscera? They're hollow organs or tubes. Viscera equal hollow organs, different from the liver, or tubes. Or it's called involuntary muscle. Involuntary. Can anybody control consciously your pupil other than looking at light? No. So it's involuntary, right? Now, as we look at this muscle, it consists of single cells and these cells are tapering. They have a central nucleus. They're tapered. They have a central nucleus. And we find them in sheets. So that they can act in mass. Act in mass, even though they're individual cells. And they're held together by, what are you going to hold them together with? What kind of tissue? Connective tissue. So we'll have the connective tissue just represented simply. CT, which binds these and allows for contraction in mass. Now, they do not have striations. But they have a protein that can contract. So let's see where we find smooth muscle. Where is the largest mass of smooth muscle in the human body? Largest mass in body. Where is it? Nope. Nope. In female. Uterus, yes. I just said body, right? So this is going to be the uterus. When we study it, we'll see its shape. It's designed to have powerful contraction. To expel the baby. I heard you say it before. Where else we have it? The GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract. Gastrointestinal tract. And there it's designed to have slow, rhythmic contractions. Pass the food along, or waste, as the case may be. Slow, rhythmic contractions. And then, where we need muscle for endurance, where do you think you're going to have smooth muscle that illustrates tremendous endurance? It's a good guess, but that's not right. This will be at the pupil of your eye all the time. Every time you look at your paper, it's expanding. You look away, contracts, and so forth. Constantly. So in the pupil, control of the pupil. Where you'll have muscle that's, this is the iris. This is the pupil. And you'll have radial muscles like this. Now put together what you've been learning. What do these radial muscles do when they contract? What are they going to do to the pupil? Dilate, sure. These dilate. Pupil. Begin to think. Then we've got circular ones. When they contract, what are we going to do? Constrict, right. So circular ones will constrict. So constantly, as you're looking, at all times, these are working. So now we need to devise another type of muscle. So let's look at our cardiac muscle and see how it differs from smooth muscle. It's going to differ in that we're going to have tubular cells. Not the tapering kind we saw in smooth muscle. They're going to have central nuclei. They're going to branch. They'll have striations. And they'll have intercalated discs. Intercalated discs. So let's see an example of cardiac muscle then. So we'll have a tubular cell. It's going to come along and it's going to branch. It will have central nuclei. It'll have intercalated discs. Where have you seen an intercalated disc before? Ever? Any junction ever look like an intercalated disc? What's it doing? It's facilitating the rate of transmission here along the fiber. It facilitates a spread of contraction. So it's a modified junction between nerve cells, which is much more efficient than between other cells. You have intercalated discs. So the minute you see those, you know you have cardiac muscle. Then we have our striations. So that gives us our basic characteristics. Now, we move on to skeletal muscle. How many times does your cardiac muscle have to beat every minute that you're sitting there? About 72 times per minute, right? Cardiac muscles contracting. Do you think that skeletal muscle can do the same? I have to do this so that you really know it. We're going to close our fist 72 times. See how your hand feels after 1 minute. 1, 2, 3, come on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. You've got fibrillation. 42, 51, 50, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56. You're not doing it back there. 57, 58, 59. This is a hands-on science class. 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. Can you imagine your heart does that for 100 years and never stops? Isn't that phenomenal? Can you see why you need a different kind of muscle for cardiac muscle versus skeletal muscle? This was skeletal muscle. No better way than to illustrate why we need different kinds of muscle, right? How does it feel? Tired? Sort of? All right. So let's look at skeletal muscle and see how it's built. So we've already studied skeletal muscle. We know its shape, we know its size, we know its location, and now we want to see how it's built. What's the longest skeletal muscle cell in your body? Sartorius, right? The longest muscle cells are the sartorius. How long did we say it was? About 35 centimeters, 14 inches. What's the shortest muscle cell in your body? Where are the smallest bones in your body? Your internal ear. So the smallest muscles are in your internal ear. They say they're 10 mu. Those are truly small muscles. And think how they're working for you now to hear your lecture, right? Everything you say, those muscles are responding. So here with this kind of muscle, since we can have one that's so long, we'll see, we're just going to take a part of a skeletal muscle. First, we're going to have peripheral nuclei, many of them per cell. We've got a cell that's going to be 14 inches long. We need lots of nuclei. So we have peripheral, multinucleated cells. And we're going to have a cell membrane. We've had a cell membrane with each, but here I'm going to give the terminology because we've got to go on and refine the structures using the terminology. So the cell membrane for a muscle is called sarcolemma. What does sarco mean in Greek? Means flesh. So this will be the membrane on the flesh. Then the cytoplasm for a muscle cell will be what? If you had to name it, what would you call it? Sarcoplasm, sure. Sarcoplasm. So all of this is sarcoplasm. Now, within the sarcoplasm, we have myofibrils, which are bands. Myofibrils. And these myofibrils are made up of what? Good guess. Myofilaments. Myofibrils made up of myofilaments. What are myofilaments made up of? Actin and myosin. Right. Actin and myosin. So let's show how these are aligned to give us our striations in our skeletal muscle. So we'll have one of our myofilaments to see what it's made of. We're going to have myosin band. Just what constitutes the striations as you can see them with your microscope. So in red, we have myosin, also called A bands. Then in green, we can put in our actin, much thinner. Green, we have actin. Called I bands. You'd think when they named it, they could have made it easier for us so that the A bands would be in the actin and you'd have two A's, but you just have to remember it's the opposite of what you might think. Now, what's coming down through our I bands? Coming down the middle of the I bands, we have Z bands. Now, what's the area between the Z bands called? That's called your, somebody said it over here a moment ago, sarcomere, right. So how are we going to define a sarcomere? A sarcomere is the structural and functional unit of skeletal muscle. It's the structural and functional unit of skeletal muscle. So now we've had two of these so far. As we go through our tissues, we're going to find these. What was the structural and functional unit of compact bone? Haversian system. The canal is only the part with the blood vessel. The system is the whole piece of bone with the lamellae, the lacunae, the whole unit is a Haversian system. All right? So this is then the structural and functional unit of, that we've got your Z bands all the way along. But now, during contraction of the muscle, the Z bands approach each other. During contraction, Z bands approach each other. Now, does that mean that the actin and myosin are going to change their length during contraction? No. It's just that the Z bands will decrease the sarcomere. So how does this take place? So we'll have a nerve impulse. To our sarcolemma. And the response is transferred internally to what's called your sarcoplasmic reticulum. Thank you. This is your smooth endoplasmic reticulum in any other cell. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which discharges a calcium ion. And the calcium ion then triggers the Z bands to move. And you get the sliding filament theory of muscle contraction. All right, with this brief introduction, it's really much more beautifully complex, but that's basic. Let's look at slides. First slide, please. We're going back because we didn't get finished slides last time. So we wanted to see our inguinal ligament. Here's your anterior iliac spine coming down to the pubic tubercle. This is your superficial inguinal ring. And we show the spermatic cord coming up with the vas deferens in it, going through the inguinal canal. It has to go to the deep ring and then into the pelvic cavity. In the next one, and this shows the aponeuroses over your abdominal muscles in the medial aspect. So here's your rectus abdominis. We said the aponeuroses was different, superior to the umbilicus. It was all going some in front and some behind, whereas below the umbilicus it was all coming in front to give extra support. But then the aponeuroses folds on itself to form the inguinal ligament, and then we have the inguinal canal showing here. But this would be our external oblique muscles going into the aponeuroses, which will then insert in the linea alba, which goes in this direction in midline. In the next one, and then these are the muscles of the lower extremity that we've been talking about. You can see the sartorius from your anterior iliac spine coming around to medial tibia, so it's going to flex the hip and flex the knee. You can see your quadriceps tendon coming in, then your patella, and then your patellar ligament coming in to insert on your tibial tubercle. We gave the tibialis anterior that's coming from lateral head here of the tibia, crossing over to go under the arch to the first metatarsal and first tarsal. Then we had the gastrocnemius and the soleus, superficial, the gastrocnemius, beneath it the soleus, and the Achilles tendon coming down to insert on the calcaneus bone. In the next one, and what kind of muscle is this? Smooth. It's been put in a solution that dissolves the connecting tissues and allows you to see the tapering smooth muscle cell with its central nucleus. In the next one, where are we going to find it? Now, when you'll see it in a slide, you don't see it separated so beautifully as before. This is all smooth muscle. In the next one, what's this? That's smooth muscle in cross-section. When you study histology, you have to know it when it's longitudinal and when you're crossing it. You might think this was blood or something else. In the next one, what kind of muscle? Cardiac. How do you know? Immediately, intercalated discs. But you can see striations. You can't see branching with this kind of preparation. Next one. What kind of muscle is it? How do you know? Where is the nucleus here? Peripheral. So you see it's really a very different type of muscle, designed for very rapid contraction in some cases, but you can see your A bands very clearly. Your I bands are in between. In the next one, what is this? Showing a nucleus in cross-section peripherally. What kind of muscle? Skeletal. This is skeletal muscle in cross-section. When you get to pathology, you've got to learn all of this in different sections, not just textbook pictures. In the next one, what kind of muscle is this? What's the slide demonstrating? What do you think these are? Blood vessels, good for you. They've injected a dye into the blood vessels. Just look at the amount of vascular supply to your skeletal muscles. Phenomenal. In the next one. Now, this is the basic principle that we were just showing. A sarcomere was between two Z bands. Here are A bands, here are I bands. When these Z bands come together, the A and I bands do not shorten. It's just the distance between the two Z bands. So you get a picture like this in full contraction. What allows it to relax? What substance allowed it to slide to begin with? Calcium. Well, the calcium goes back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and then your muscle relaxes. Isn't that beautiful as you walk across campus and think about that? All right, well, that's it for now, and we have our next lecture starting at 12:10 today.